Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden. I'm changing up the subject for this episode. I realized at the end of the last episode, I said that we would be talking about sex trafficking this week, but Prince Philip's funeral happened on Saturday, and there's been so much gossip and interest in the whole Harry, Meghan, Prince William family soap opera that I thought, if my listeners will indulge me, I would bring on instead a royal expert this week to talk about the funeral, to talk about the ongoing real life drama of the crown, and to explain what is going on to us North Americans. So my guest this week is Rachel Johnson. She is a very well-known British journalist, television presenter. She's the author of 5 novels. She has a book that's going to be published this year, which is a memoir about her campaign to defeat Brexit, which, of course, it was not defeated, but she was on the anti-Brexit side. And she's, as her last name suggests, she's the sister of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So for this conversation, we're just going to cover the royals and the royal funeral. And I'm looking forward to having her back when her book appears in the United States. And I'll get all that other political gossip, as well as talk to her about her own background growing up. Her parents, and this is Boris's father as well, was a conservative politician. And Rachel herself was a candidate for Change UK for the Southwest England constituency in the 2019 European Parliament election. So she's a fascinating person, but I am tapping her for her royal knowledge. She is well connected in those circles in England. And I wanted to talk to her about, now that Prince Philip is dead, what were her reactions watching the funeral? What do we think is going to be the future? Not just of the monarchy, but that endlessly interesting royal family. So stay with me. I'm bringing on Rachel Johnson. If there's ever been a year to make the moms in your life feel loved and appreciated on Mother's Day, it's this one. That's why I'm honoring my mom with a heartfelt, sentimental gift that the whole family can cherish together forever. Storyworth. Storyworth is an online service that helps your mom, grandmother, mother-in-law, or every mother figure in your life share stories through thought-provoking questions about their memories and personal thoughts. It's a fun new way to engage with them, especially when you can't be together in person. Every week, Storyworth emails your mom or relative of choice a different story prompt, questions you've never thought to ask, like, what is some of the best advice your mother ever gave you? Or if you could choose any talents to have, what would they be? Storyworth has helped numerous families learn about each other in profound, special ways, and their testimonials will practically move you to tears. In fact, Storyworth has already created a powerful experience for me because, well, it's easy to put off asking your family questions until it's too late. And because of the originality of the questions, you'd be surprised about how much you learn about even those you thought you knew so well, like, Mom, I knew you didn't like certain vegetables, but I had no idea it went back to the really bad food and the shortages you experienced as a child growing up during World War II. Well, there's no shortage of surprises when reading the weekly stories, and they make your family feel close, even if you're not together. And when my mother and I started our Storyworth, who knew we would be recording it through such a historic time? After 1 year, Storyworth will compile all your stories, including photos, into a beautiful keepsake book that's shipped for free. We've just completed a year of questions, and I can't wait for mine to arrive. So don't wait. Give your mom the most meaningful gift this Mother's Day with Storyworth. Get started right away with no shipping required by going to Storyworth, that's STORYWORTH, storyworth.com/femsplain. And you'll get $10 off your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/femsplain for $10 off. welcome to the Femsplainers.
Well, it's a great honor and a privilege to join you, Danielle.
Well, I'm so absolutely thrilled to have you, and it's wonderful to see you. I think the last time I physically saw you would have been in the 90s in Washington, D.C., and I think we were both covered with small children.
Absolutely covered by them. And I had three, when I was in DC, I had 3 under 4.
Yes, I remember. And I remember your husband, Ivo, coming by or seeing him somewhere, and they were just hanging off him like chimpanzees on a tree, you know, and he was very good about it.
And I remember being furious when we were both sacked from our various jobs in Washington, D.C., and sent back to Blighty. In fact, we didn't end up going back to Blighty. We went to Brussels, which is a whole other story. Because what was so great about living in Washington, D.C. with small children, which I clocked this immediately, was that you could park anywhere. Oh. Now, coming from London, yes, where you can't park anywhere, especially in the city of Westminster, where they are Nazis about, they zone it, it's like trying to park in New York. So Washington, D.C., off-street parking. I mean, I could have lived there for the rest of my life for that reason alone.
Well, and you also we had moved here from New York, and you also got the benefit of a lawn as well, which you can't get. Which similar in London, you can't have a lawn.
Chevy Chase, DC, where we lived, lawn out front, yard out back.
Yeah.
With a swing set. I remember, though, the neighbors actually rang the police one day because my toddler, who was sort of 9 months or maybe 1 year, was toddling around our own backyard without any clothes on, and they rang the police.
Well, we I don't think of Washington as so prudish a place, but maybe they thought you were neglecting the child, and he was, Americans are very, not laissez-faire about child rearing. So maybe they thought he had escaped.
No, I mean, he was clearly with me. He was clearly with me playing. So I was so outraged, I ended up writing a piece for the Telegraph about it. Anyway, what are we talking about?
Well, okay, so I'm getting you in the English countryside, right? Out of London.
I'm in deepest, darkest Somerset in a national park called Exmoor, which is a place of quite astonishing beauty. Moorland, coasts, green valleys, beautiful villages with welcoming pubs, foaming pints of ale.
Oh, man.
I know. And the sun is shining.
You just took us on a pandemic trip. It was lovely. For a minute, I thought the world was normal and we were there. But you have just come off watching, as I have, we're recording this right after watching Prince Philip's funeral.
Yeah.
And I watched the American coverage, which was co-hosted by Gayle King, Meghan,
really?
friend. And Tina Brown was on, and she always gives great commentary. But I thought, for Americans, this must look so strange, not least because I think the Americans would see it as, well, that was very cold and sort of impersonal. And yet this is what the English, until 5 minutes ago was considered one of their greatest virtues, was to be kind of cold and impersonal and stiff upper lip and regal.
It was. I mean, it's funny, you said cold and impersonal. To the English viewer, that was a profoundly moving and historic occasion. And what made it so moving was its very reserve and those emblematic touches that I'm sure Tina Brown probably mentioned herself, seeing his leather gloves that he used to wear every time he took a carriage drive, and hearing, the piper play Over the Sea to Sky. These are the things that the English respond to emotionally, not oversharey, hugging and kissing and emoting and sharing your truth. Well, right. We know that.
Right. And it was, I think actually your reserve, your use of the word reserve is better than cold, but that is very English. And this is exactly what, as the, underlying plot of the funeral too, or one of the side plots, was Harry and William and Kate coming back to his family, And, he left the family, as he said famously, he and Meghan, because of this incredible reserve and button-downness.
Yes, he said it was dysfunctional and he felt trapped, and he tried to educate his own father and his own brother, who are the second and third in line to the throne. First and second in line to the throne. Harry is the sixth. Mm-hmm. He had tried to educate them in what it was like to be trapped in the amber of the royal family. And I think, that was one of the lines that people had running through their heads when they watched the prince's first process behind the Land Rover, which contained the coffin of the Duke of Edinburgh, grandfather and father, which was, how do you get past saying something like that when the whole life and purpose of your brother and father is to exist within that family and to fulfill the destiny of service and purpose that birth has not prisoned you in, but has bestowed on you. That's how people feel about it. It's not a prison. It's a privilege.
And what did you think was, afterwards we saw them leave the church and he and Harry, William and Kate looked like almost nothing had happened. They were chatting, they were smiling as they walked, I guess, to the family reception after. I just kept having the punchline of a Jewish joke running through my head as I was watching it, which was, I'll forget Sheldon and you'll forget Sheldon, but I won't forget Sheldon, and don't you forget it, Sheldon. And I just have to imagine that they are sitting there and this tribute to this life of incredible service by the Duke. And in second place, always having to defer to the Queen and walk behind, as we know. And yet now Harry is there, and you have to think that they're all pretty mad that in the last month of this man's life, must have caused such grief to the man, to his grandfather.
He was the Duke of Edinburgh, everyone who met him said he was very pragmatic. A YouGov poll suggested that something like 22% of the population claims to have met the Duke of Edinburgh. Therefore, 1 in 5 people has got a Duke of Edinburgh anecdote. And if you basically weighted those anecdotes, most of them would say he didn't indulge his emotions. He didn't indulge other people's emotions, and he probably treated the Harry and Meghan saga and the separation, the rift between the princes, as a problem to solve, like fixing the Land Rover so that it was ready to receive his own coffin. He was a doer, he was a sailor, he was a get on with it and let's get this done type of person. And I think more than it upsetting him, I think he would have found it really unbearably distracting. Mm-hmm. These are also private matters, but necessarily in the royal family, they are made public, both by people writing and the courtiers who leak things, and the various principals and the actors in the royal family who also talk. And I think he would have found that all very unnecessary and uncalled for, probably would have knocked some heads together if Harry had been around in this country. Sadly, Harry wasn't. Harry was in California with Meghan, who, as we kept hearing, the doctors sadly told her she couldn't come, but nobody over here thought that the reason was medical, that Meghan did not attend Prince Philip's funeral. It was a recognition that her presence would have been too much of a distraction. And also from her perspective, she definitely wouldn't have been the center of attention. She wouldn't have wanted to have, it was a lose-lose for her attending it.
Right.
But for Harry, I think we saw signs of a rapprochement between the brothers. However staged it was, however choreographed it was, I even felt some relief. They were talking, thank goodness, because generally speaking, life comes at you fast. And we just lost one of the most loved members of the royal family. And people can barely remember what they were fighting about now. Was it the bridesmaids' dresses? Was it the tiara? Was it who made who cry? Was it Harry's and Meghan's interview with Oprah? We're all kind of like, let's move on.
Right, which all seems, and I think very petty. And that's what in retrospect, and that's what I also wonder, that now with Harry being back there without Meghan and being sort of brought back somewhat into the fold and being reminded of all this cold pomp that he rejected and this great trap of royalty, I wonder if there's any wistfulness,
Interesting, isn't it? Seeing Harry back in the bosom of the royal family and surrounded by the males, mostly the males. And of course, there was Princess Anne, which I think broke with precedent because usually it's only the men. In the funeral of Diana, of course, it was the men, Charles, Duke of Edinburgh, and the two princes who walked up behind her cortege. I want two things, it can go one of two ways. Either he realizes that he needs to be back and he will have to come to some accommodation with that. The life of being a chimpo, a chief impact officer for a California startup for mental health, maybe isn't what he wants to do the rest of his life. And maybe he realizes his destiny is here. Or this would have reminded him exactly what you say. It's cold, it's austere, it's full of pomp. Everyone looks like a playing card. You need a running commentary to understand who's playing the trumpet and who walks.
Yeah, the different uniforms and costumes. Like, who are those guys with the horse riding hats and and then the sort of Disney-like gold.
I know the guys who look like playing cards.
Yes,
with
they really did.
Yeah.
or Alice in Wonderland.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think it would have gone up one of two ways. He would either have thought, this is where I should be, or I want to get the hell out of Dodge.
Right.
We don't know. We're not inside Prince Harry's head.
Well, you had, I'm just going to read it because one of your recent articles for Airmail, which I love, by the way. I love Airmail and I love your articles in Airmail.
I love Airmail. Everyone subscribe to Airmail.
Yes. It's, anyway, you wrote, as the world now knows, the sixth in line has become a Silicon Valley life coaching exec. His full title is not Duke of Sussex, but Chief Impact Officer at a mental health tech startup app called BetterUp, the people experience platform. And then you wrote, my first instinct was, surely this is a joke on all of us by the Fresh Prince across the water. After all, the nickname for a chief impact officer is, as you said, chimpo. But again, no. The Duke of Sussex's goal is to, quote, lift up critical dialogue around mental health and empower us to become our best version of ourselves. And you then say, most Brits, I have to tell you, you assume that the only reason Harry speaks like this is because he's been body snatched. And only that can explain why he sounds like he's reading out scripts in a hostage video.
A corporate hostage video.
A corporate hostage. So they have explained how foreign wokeness is to England, because I was fascinated by the polls after Harry and Meghan's interview that showed like they were completely split. And the majority of Americans, I believe, sympathetic to Harry and Meghan, and a majority of Brits completely unsympathetic to Harry and Meghan.
There's another split, which is generational. Anyone over 40 is very, very much pro-monarchy. They think Harry and Meghan are behaving like spoilt brats, and to complain about the fact that they, live in a Frogmore Cottage, which is a sort of enormous house, and they are taken care of by not just the Queen, but by the taxpayer, the Duke of, the Prince of Wales, Cornish duchy money. They are not short of a bob or two. They are not short of care and attention. And yet the narrative was they had been neglected, they had been abused, they had been their prospective child had been racially abused. And I think people felt that narrative didn't really ring terribly true. I mean, a lot of however, in defense of what Meghan said, it was a lot of what she said echoed things that Princess Diana had said when she was left
which
alone.
Was also a bit creepy in a way, because
maybe she channeled it. Don't forget, Diana was like 18, 19, and Meghan was a divorced woman about to hit 40. There isn't, who knows the ways of the world, who has been independent, who's earned her own living, who's acted in a popular soap opera. And yet she was doing the little I was left alone, nobody looked after me shtick that Diana never did in public. She talked to Andrew Morton, but she would never have done a sit-down interview, even the one she did with Martin Bashir. She was bracing, she was funny. You know, there were 3 of us in this marriage. It was a bit crowded. So she glossed over rather elegantly a lot of her really deep complaints, i.e. Charles had a mistress. You know, what is a comparable complaint that Meghan or Markle or Harry could make? I don't see it. I wrote myself several pieces welcoming Meghan with open arms. I wrote a live blog, well, you know, for the Mail on Sunday while she got married to Prince Harry. I said, you know, she entered the church as Meghan Markle. She left the church, you know, a fairy tale royal princess. You know, it was such a Disney fairy tale that she was in, and the whole country was swept up in it.
Our longtime listeners know that we are a dog-loving podcast. But I must reveal to you that among our co-splainers are cat lovers, indeed even cat owners, one of them being Caitlin Flanagan. So she told me she has many names for her cat of 12 years. By the way, dogs don't go by many names, but apparently her cat does. And some of them include Duffy, Little Black Cat, and even Psycho. But because she's old, she's facing some health issues. So Caitlin was very excited to hear about one of our new sponsors, Pretty Litter. Now, like any cat owner, Caitlin is not fond of the stink bombs her cat leaves in her litter box. Everything from cleaning to covering up the smell is a constant battle. Enter Pretty Litter. Pretty Litter is kitty litter reinvented. Unlike traditional litter, Pretty Litter's super-light crystals trap odor and release moisture, resulting in dry, low-maintenance litter that doesn't smell. And Pretty Litter is virtually dust-free because it's manufactured with a specialized dedusting process. Less dust and no fuss. And Pretty Litter arrives safely at your door in a small, lightweight bag that lasts up to a month. And with free monthly auto shipping, you don't have to deal with those last-minute trips to the store. But above all else, here's why Pretty Litter is a pet parent's hero. It's a health indicator. Pretty Litter actually monitors cats' health by changing colors when it detects potential underlying issues. So you won't find that kind of innovation in conventional litter. So if Duffy or Psycho develops an issue, her litter will tell Caitlin. Honestly, if there's no smell, I might have to announce to our Labradors that maybe we'll get a cat tenant. In any case, get the world's smartest litter without leaving home by visiting prettylitter.com and use promo code FEMSPLAIN for 20% off your first order. That's prettylitter.com, promo code FEMSPLAIN for 20% off. prettylitter.com, promo code, FEMSPLAIN. Well, I remember, I mean, I've followed this closely, as my poor listeners know. I think it's the Canadian in me. I'm very obsessed with the monarchy. And I mean, there were so many things that were odd, including, I thought this, as you say, 38 or whatever it was, 37-year-old divorcee in a full white gown, having this fairy tale wedding. I thought that was a bit strange, but okay. But it was, I mean, they were treated like rock stars. You did a kind of mea culpa at one point, because you were, as you say, in the belly of the beast. You were writing columns all through that. And you feel that you and others may have been unfair towards her.
I'm sure I was.
Some of the coverage.
And I, you know, one does, people, I'm a journalist, I'm doing my job, I'm writing commentary. I regret any pain I cause. I'm not really a very good columnist because I don't stick the boot in very much, because I actually feel I feel empathy for other women. Even if I don't necessarily believe them, I do believe Meghan when she says this is what she believes. If it's true or not, we could parse that forever. It is definitely what she now believes has happened to her. And she seems to have forgotten so much of the warmth and welcome and joy that she created and she generated, and with which she was met when she came here.
Right, down from Charles walking her down the aisle, being given this wedding of her dreams and the house and everything. And I do remember the coverage is glowing, although, they've pulled up a lot of examples of less than glowing coverage. But then that, like every royal, the question was it worse for her than other royals? It didn't seem that way.
So I genuinely, I'm being around the block. It wasn't my first rodeo. I really don't think so. I think it gave, however, if there were any complaints, it gave Meghan two completely winning weapons in her arsenal, which was she was traduced and abused and trolled for two reasons. She played the race card, and then she played the mental health card in what she said to Oprah Winfrey. And those are two cards that I felt were low tricks, because these are two things the royal family could really not defend itself against, especially when you don't name the member of the royal family who was supposed to have queried what color the baby Archie's skin would be, for example. It unfairly, I thought, brought the entire family, it brought a cloud of suspicion of racism over the entire family, which I think is going to be tough for William, because as you saw, one of the only things he said since that interview is, we are very much not a racist family. So he did contradict her.
Do you have have you in your connections, is there any suspicion of A, whether this is true? It might not be true. But B, who it might have been? Is there, I've seen Princess.
I have no idea. I mean, everyone has their suspects, but, lots of people have also come out to say, and, I regret if it upset Meghan, because clearly you don't want to have somebody in the bosom of your family who feels horrified by your attitude to them. But a lot of people have subsequently said, it's all, when I married my wife, we constantly discussed what color the baby would be or what the color the hair would be. And it is the sort of conversation you have, but maybe a more sensitivity was required when you were asking this question of the first mixed race royal princess this country has ever welcomed to its bosom. Well, I don't know it.
Exactly. And I think one of the things, again, that the funeral evoking that profound sense of duty over everything, that the other misunderstanding and where you feel sympathy to the story that Prince William sort of said, are you sure about this? You're not racing this. You're bringing this American actress into this kind of historic institution with no training. And I think she thought it was going to be like being a celebrity. That she was going to be like Amal Clooney, not understanding that you can't just have your own private jets and lavish things. I mean, George had to earn those things as well, and as does Amal.
I think you're bang on.
And then she's second fiddle to this other woman. Like, wait a second, I go second. I don't get the same privileges as Kate. I mean, just the whole rank thing, I think, must have rankled, as it were.
Totally. I think that's completely right. And when she first arrived, there was a whole kind of setup which was called the Fab Four. And they were all going to be, there was going to be this Beatles-like younger generation, the rock stars of the royal family were going to go and change the world. And they did that press conference where they talked about the charity, which Meghan was highly articulate. She's very clever.
And a mental health charity at that. That's the other thing that was so weird. Like,
Kate was pregnant.
Yeah.
But I think she thought that she was, of course, her equal, the equal to Kate Middleton, and Prince Harry was William's equal. And she hadn't quite understood that she was always going to be married to the spare, not the heir. And I genuinely think that must have played a huge part in her decision to bail, to say, no, I'm out. Because why would, for the Duke of Edinburgh for 73 years walk 2 paces behind the Queen? I don't think Meghan Markle ever would see herself walking behind Kate Middleton, which is why, of course, that story about the bridesmaids' dresses is so riveting. I mean, I'm so here for reading 4,000 words on who made who cry over this in the fitting of the flower girls' dresses, because that was all essentially about a power struggle. All these things are a power struggle. It was, she wanted, it was an assertion of rank over the other, and a fight, and flowers were delivered and rejected, and doors were slammed, and tears were shed. And that is because, Kate Middleton is going to be queen, and Meghan actually is never going to be queen. She could have had the most extraordinary career, however. This is the sad part. Prince Harry and Meghan, a story that has come out here, I don't know if it's come out in the US, is that the Queen said to Meghan, you can carry on acting, don't give it up. Because she recognised how hard her role would be as second fiddle to Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge. So she said, carry on acting. And, it's hard being a woman in the royal family if you don't have a role. It's especially hard if you don't have the top role, which is what Kate Middleton has. Oh, also, the Duchess of Cornwall, the Prince, I don't know what she is going to be called in the end. I think there's some negotiation as to whether she will be called Queen Camilla. You've got to watch that space.
Yes, no, I will.
Prince Charles is in negotiations on that very topic.
Well, and I think what was so sad is, regardless of what was going on behind the scenes, Harry and Meghan did become superstars, and certainly to outside of England. I mean, here they were just always on the cover of, the celebrity magazines. They were seen as superstars, and superstars that had she really had a role, both of them, to do. Sure, good.
The Commonwealth. Yes, so sorry, that was what I was going to add. Yeah. She could carry on acting. She decided not to. Then the Queen said, you can be my representatives in the Commonwealth. I mean, What could have been greater for them to go to Africa, to go around the Caribbean, the dependent territories, all of those places where the Queen is still the head of state, to represent the Queen in those 70 countries or whatever it is. Correct me, I can't remember what it is. And they would have had a total purpose.
Right. Even with her work with the victims of that terrible fire.
Grenfell fire, yeah.
Right, exactly. The Grenfell, she did the cookbook, like she just, and she was very creative, and she did all these really wonderful things. And now you read, they're at a celebrity soup kitchen, handing out bowls of soup in LA. That's nice.
What are they doing? You tell me, what are they doing? They're over there.
It's genuinely not clear. I mean, they've signed these deals, but actually the intel I have on the like the soup kitchen stuff. So they'll occasionally just be photographed, I think, so as to be seen, especially when they're going back and forth as you can be dutiful, you can do service. It just doesn't have to be, for the Queen. And then they'd go be photographed at a soup kitchen. Except that, as I've discovered from my friends in LA, the soup kitchen they were photographed at is where celebrities go to be photographed at soup kitchens. And actually to be able to volunteer at that soup kitchen, there's like the longest wait, It's like
the celebrities can queue jump and be photographed.
Yes, exactly. And it is like the soup kitchen to be in that LA way. And, that she sent a lemon cake to some women's shelter and things, but it's nothing on the scale that that they were doing in England. And also they don't have, and this is where I think the United States is especially brutal. You've got to have money. You've got to have millions upon millions. And these days, tens and hundreds of millions to be a real player in the charity space. And to wield influence. And when you think of like the Lorene Jobs and all now the billionaires we have and all the money they're giving to huge causes and, helping vaccinations in Africa and everything you can imagine, sort of showing up and being woke at a women's shelter is not is not on the scale of certainly what they were doing before.
Yes, and also, they launched a series, Archwell Podcast. I listened to one. It was beyond terrible to listen to. I mean, they had every single famous friend they had in a clip about how lockdown had affected them or something.
Yeah.
Okay, you're the podcast expert. I'm about to launch a podcast, but was that an interesting podcast?
I found the ad for it so cloying that I didn't listen, but as you know, like it'll be interesting because I would love to have a whole slew of A-lister celebrity friends to call on.
Me too. My podcast.
but then to make it an interesting conversation, it you don't just want to hear
Elton John
talking about their great cause for AIDS. Like really, that's what I mean. Fine, it's worthy, I guess, to talk about it, but it's not what people want to listen to. So I think they've got a lot of smoke and mirrors, but they did give up a real opportunity leaving behind England. And I wonder what Prince, I keep thinking of a line that Prince Philip apparently said when he heard that Harry was potentially going to marry Meghan, and you can confirm it if you know it.
I think I know the one you mean. You take an actress, you don't marry one.
Yes, you go about with actresses, but you don't marry them.
Yeah.
Is that true? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Prince Philip will probably know. Have plenty of experience on that score.
Yes.
Ballerinas, if we believe the Crown.
Now, just before you go, now the Commonwealth, and I think the thing that watching this funeral, the sad, crumpled Queen, she looked so.
I know,
like
reduced.
Oh, and
I know. What a heartrending. I mean, the
image.
The COVID protocols at funerals must be one of the saddest, most pointless human exercises in, self-denial that any government has ever devised.
But you sort of see the history, like the Queen and Prince Philip have been, they go back so far. They go back to Winston Churchill, this span, and kept the monarchy what it is, kept this sense of commonwealth and belonging. And then you see the Queen and you realize when she's gone, it's hard to imagine Prince Charles or even Prince William stepping up because I think, especially the Commonwealth is held together because of that long history.
I know.
And there's no sense of that same history when Charles steps up. And now that that Britain has separated itself from Europe, I sort of fear it's going to become like a bicycle monarchy. Is that fair? Like the whole importance of it?
I don't see that happening soon. I think Prince Charles will become king. I think Prince William will become king. But I do think that many people would have felt as they watched that really astonishing service and the preparations and the army, the servicemen who stood there. So it was also immaculate. The country had its absolute finery on for the world. It couldn't have been a better advertisement, not just for this country, but for the monarchy, what we saw today. But I do think that there was also a sense of how can we sustain this? How can we sustain this meticulous grandeur, this extraordinary ability to channel public mood, to channel emotion with the reserve and dignity that she embodies? And how can any man, woman, or beast ever achieve what she achieved in her shoes without putting really a foot wrong? You can argue the only times that she ever did was, she didn't rush to Aberfan in time when the slag heap descended on a children's school, killing dozens of small children. And the only other time in her long reign was, which continues, and long may she live, was when she didn't come back from Scotland with the boys when Princess Diana died in 97. And, arguably why would you go back to London with seething crowds of mourners when you really wanted to nest with your boys and comfort them apart, away from the prying eyes of the press and the baying headlines? So, apart from that, she has really put in a shift. And it's just hard to see how her son and her grandson can ever meet her almost impossible standard. Nice, I'm sure, and dutiful and respectful though they are. They just won't command the same. They cannot command the same respect and love.
And is it an issue that they're not woke? I mean, in the sense that, like, you'll see now in this, multicultural Britain, these I hate using this term, but the old white men coming, and I think that's why there's so much sympathy for Meghan and Harry over here. Is like, well, we tried to make it woke, we tried to make it more inclusive, and that could have been a good role that they played had they not left. But how do you see Prince Charles or William ruling with that kind of,
well,
from the public, as it were, lack of demographic identification, maybe?
It's going to be a natural succession. When somebody becomes king, when the Queen is dead and it's long live the king, people, it's like a prime minister doesn't look like a prime minister until they're standing on the steps of Downing Street. He will become kingly on his accession to the throne. That's just how it happens. It's the weird woo-woo of anointing him with the essential oils of kingship and majesty that happened behind the shrouded screen, that happened at the Queen's coronation. It's a sort. Don't forget that this sounds crazy. They are supposed to be somewhere between Her Majesty, between God and man.
Right.
Okay? So there is that weird suspension of disbelief when it comes to the royal family. How can it be that we bow and curtsy and regard them as our head of state? This is just normal, because we decide to invest them with that power and that pomp and that history and circumstance and all those things. It's our decision. The monarchy doesn't exist for them. It exists for us. We will them into being, and we will will Prince Charles into being when his time comes.
And demographically, even though England is changing and has changed so much, you think that carries into the hearts and bosoms of the new immigrants to England?
I cannot. You just got to look at the polling. The monarchy has always been very popular. The royal family is very popular. And when you look at the TV pictures today, I mean, you watched it in America. Why? It's popular in America too. Yeah. It's the greatest soap opera in the world. Everyone's glued.
Thank you for taking the time to be with it and explain this all to us, North Americans, Rachel. And you're not even doing it with a glass of wine. And
I'm going to go grab one right now. Thanks. Best wishes to femme-splainers around the world.
Thank you. And thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good night.
So have you ever browsed in incognito mode? It's probably not as incognito as you think. Why would it be? Incognito mode, like the Chrome browser itself, is a Google product. And Google has made its fortune by tracking your movements online. There's even a $5 billion class action lawsuit against the company in California, where it's accused of secretly collecting user data. Google's defense? Incognito doesn't mean invisible. So how do you actually make yourself as invisible as possible online? It's with ExpressVPN. Turns out that even in incognito mode, your online activity still gets tracked and data brokers still get to buy and sell your data. One of these data points is your IP address. Data harvesters use your IP to uniquely identify you and your location. But with ExpressVPN, your connection gets rerouted through an encrypted server and your IP address is masked. Every time you connect to ExpressVPN, you get a random IP address shared by many other ExpressVPN customers. That makes it harder for third parties to identify you or to harvest your data. Best of all, ExpressVPN is super easy to use. No matter what device you're on, phone, laptop, smart TV, all you have to do is tap one button for instant protection. So if you really want to go incognito and protect your privacy, secure yourself with the #1 rated VPN. Visit ExpressVPN, that's V as in Victor, P as in Peter, N as in Nancy, expressvpn.com/femsplain. You get 3 extra months for free. That's expressvpn.com/femsplain. expressvpn.com/femsplain for 3 months for free. Well, thank you, listeners who are not royal fans, for indulging me in this week's topic. And I promise not to do it again for a while unless some of you want me to. So you can always reach out to contact at Femsplainers. I don't know, we could even just have our own private cocktail party to gossip about the royals. Which reminds me, if you want to support the podcast and join our monthly cocktail party with subscribers, please consider going to patreon.com/femsplainers. Help support the podcast. We really can't do it without you. Pay what you can afford every month, and you keep these conversations going, and you get benefits. You get a monthly podcast for subscribers only called Last Call, in which you get to ask our guest questions, and the cocktail party is mentioned, and our newsletter. So please join patreon.com/femsplainers, and we'll see you next time. The Femsplainers is a weekly podcast carried on the Ricochet Network and available pretty much on every podcast platform. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and watch video of our interviews on YouTube. You'll find links to everything, plus how to contact us directly at femsplainers.com. We survive and depend on your support. Like the show? Consider donating as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/femsplainers. And get our exclusive monthly bonus episode, Last Call, in which you get to join the conversation with our guests. And there's much more. And a big shout out of thanks to our audio and video editor, Nat Frum.